Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. For those of you who watch the show on a daily basis on our social media platforms, we are up and running. Had some technical issues, so you could go to our social media platforms: Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. The handle is the same on all of those, at XTRA Sports 1300. So last night, in terms of the results, pretty good. Avs come back from that 4-0 deficit to beat Buffalo, and the Nuggets get a win. I will say right off the bat that the most important aspect of last night's win is that those courts are now done. Right? That's a wrap. That was the last night of the NBA Cup. Nuggets eliminated from contention for that. Can we be done with the bright yellow court? I hope so. It looked like it was a Warriors home game. Like, you have the ability, and they do. They put the cup, the NBA Cup, in the middle of the floor. Isn't that enough to signify, like, hey, this is not your normal? You got to also, hit what's the paint bucket in the Microsoft Paint? No, I know no one uses Paint anymore. But remember that? When you had the fill and you just go and you click the area and it fills the whole, like, do we have to do that with the courts? The Nuggets, I'm fine with their color scheme. More than fine. I think it's a fine color scheme. They utilize colors that should not be splashed all over the court. Makes it very distracting. And perhaps I am showing my age. Sounds like an old guy rant to complain about the courts. I can't stand them. And the best thing about last night is we don't have to see it anymore until next year. And heaven help us all if they decide to go red. But the Nuggets do get a win over the Golden State Warriors. Michael Malone has been discussing the defense of his team as of late quite a bit. He was asked last night about the way the defense played to allow the Nuggets to come back and rally and win that game late.
Jamal gets a big block. Russ makes a big defensive play. I hope somebody's got like a snapshot of Christian Brown laying out for that loose ball before he didn't call a timeout. That's what it takes. You're right. It wasn't pretty, but to win in this league, it's not always going to be pretty, and we needed a win, especially on our home court.
Let me take an off ramp here for a second before we get into the nuts and bolts of last night. The joke that Michael Malone had about Christian Brown calling the timeout. So if you didn't see it, Christian Brown lays out. It reminded me of that picture of Dennis Rodman. It's like the picture of Dennis Rodman, right? He's like laying out like Superman to save a ball from going out of bounds. That's the indelible Dennis Rodman image. That's what Christian Brown did to get to that loose ball. The problem is, and I'm not worried about him rolling over the ball. Like the NBA, they never call that. So if for those people who are watching, be like, how is that not? They never call that. But when he rolls over with the ball, he pretty clearly tries to call timeout. Referees don't award him the timeout. And it's a good thing because if they would have recognized that he had called timeout, the Nuggets would have been called for a technical because he basically pulled a Spoelstra. Isn't Chris Webber the happiest guy on earth that now we have this more recent example of somebody calling a timeout when they don't have one in Eric Spoelstra? Like, I know it's always going to be Chris Webber. We're always going to think of him. But at least there will be another example of it. At least Chris Webber's not alone on that island. Eric Spoelstra earlier this year got frustrated, called the timeout. He didn't have it. Cost Miami the game. Should have been a technical. Absolutely. Referee after the game said, he didn't signal properly or emphatic enough. I don't know what that. We looking for the T here, like you actually have to make this sign of a T with your two hands and press your fingertips from one hand into the palm of the other. I saw Christian Braun calling timeout. It should have been a technical foul, and I understand wholeheartedly why Steve Kerr was absolutely apoplectic. Because Golden State knocks down the free throw, and now they have an inbounds pass in the Nuggets half of the court with 5 seconds left. And they have the greatest shooter in the history of basketball. There's no guarantee that they get it. And even 5 seconds is not a lot of time for the Warriors to get the look that they want from Steph Curry. But they were denied even that chance. And they hit the free throw, and let's say Steph knocks one down at the buzzer, we're going to overtime. And then who knows what would happen. So I get why Steve Kerr was upset. I also commend him for not being one of those people that say that cost us the game. He pointed out it didn't cost us the game, but I was really angry about it, and I think he was justifiably angry about it. So Steve Kerr's right. Like, that is, I don't know what that explanation was from the referee. Christian Braun called timeout. That's what I saw. And it should have been a technical foul. So there's my digression. We'll see if this is something with this Nuggets team. Because the Golden State Warriors coming into last night's game had blown lead after blown lead after blown lead. That's the reason why they were on a 4-game losing streak. They've had leads in pretty much all of these games, and they've squandered them. So the extremely stoppable force met the extremely movable object late in that game. The Nuggets defense met the Warriors' recent propensity to cough up leads. And the Nuggets defense, whether they are the force or the object, you pick, they ended up winning out. Is this a sign that they have figured out some things defensively? If so, I don't think it's any coincidence that Aaron Gordon played that whole game. But I got to see it again, because I know what the Warriors were coming into last night's game. And it could have been just them. It could have been. But as Michael Malone mentioned, there are a couple of big defensive plays. Jamal Murray's block was fantastic. So we'll see if it's real, if it's them figuring out something. Because the entire premise of this starting five, and it goes back to, why is this guy getting a max? Why is this guy getting a max? They're not on their own max players. Michael Porter, now Jamal Murray. The reason is because as a collective unit, they are worth whatever that dollar amount is. Right? That's how good the Nuggets starting five was. That maybe Porter and Jamal Murray on their own aren't worth $200 some odd million, but if you can secure them, because if they don't pay them, they're not going to keep them, right? Obviously. So it's not about each individual player being worth that amount of money. It's that the unit as a whole is worth that amount of money. And everything with the Denver Nuggets in that group, you kind of got to base on each other, the whole, rather than the sum of its parts. How that unit interacts together, how well they work together, defensively and offensively. And not having Aaron Gordon there, certainly, if you think of him like a wheel, one of the spokes was all messed up and the wheel kind of was flattened on one side. But I also look and I say that they have another guy in that starting five that's not quite what his predecessor was. And that's a big reason why the Nuggets are 23rd, 24th in the NBA in defensive efficiency, when last year and the previous year and the year before that, they were in the top 10. But having Aaron Gordon back helps immensely. There was another bite from last night that I wanted to play you, and it comes courtesy of Nikola Jokic. This was to TNT after the game when he was asked what he's learned about his team over the course of the early season. We can surprise in a good way or a bad way. And it goes back to what I was talking about with Alexander Georgiev and the Avs goaltending situation. What the Avs need from that position, even if it's not elite, is just consistency. So they can make the necessary adjustments to compensate for any shortcomings. But this one night to the next stuff, it being a mixed bag, that doesn't work. And that has been a little bit of the Nuggets' problem. Right? And you could look at everybody, and Nikola Jokic is going to lump himself in, but let's omit him from the conversation for obvious reasons. Jamal Murray. Aaron Gordon's health, right, hasn't been consistent. He was in to start the season, then he was out, now he's back. The bench unit, even Russell Westbrook. Right? Overall, he's been a net positive, I think. But there are some nights where Russell Westbrook really struggles. And then 2 nights later, he has this eye-popping stat line. Nuggets need to find their consistency too. Whatever, and I look especially at the younger guys, but also Jamal Murray. The younger guys being Christian Brown, Peyton Watson. These are 2 guys that are supposed to be key players for this Nuggets team. What are they going to settle into? What are they going to be this year? That has to be figured out. And still the perpetual, I mean, Jamal Murray is inconsistent from quarter 1 to quarter 4. And last night was a great example of that too. You don't know what you're going to get from Jamal Murray through the course of a game, let alone one game to the next. The Nuggets need to settle in, even if some of these guys aren't quite what you hope they would be. You just got to figure out what they are and work from there. Charles Barkley said last night they were doing a segment where Kenny Smith was talking about the number of teams that believe they can win a championship in Adam Silver's NBA, the death of the super team, right? And Charles Barkley wasn't really grasping the concept because he kept saying, I don't believe in this team. And Kenny Smith's like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying there are 9 teams that believe they can win a title. But Charles Barkley said, without a trade, the Nuggets can't win a title. And it's hard to argue at this stage with that. But the first step before you really assess what the Nuggets need to do and whether they can even do it is you got to have a good sense of what some of these players are. The new guys, the younger guys that are taking on bigger roles, and Jamal Murray. I think I know I'm going to get on a nightly basis with Porter. If he's healthy, I know what I'll get from Aaron Gordon, and I know what I'll get from Nikola Jokic, which is MVP, best player in the world, caliber play almost every single night, without exception. Got to figure out what some of these other guys are. And that's, I guess, in a way, that could be the silver lining of it is it's very early. But the consistency just isn't there with this team, especially on the defensive end. Maybe Michael Malone's right. Maybe it's a step in the right direction, even with, as he admitted, much room to improve. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Nugs and Avalanche wins last night. Coming up next, the Switchbacks lock up another member of their championship team. I'll tell you who coming up next. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and we want to make it even better with $1,000 towards your winter wish list. Use it for holiday shopping, travel, or to treat yourself. Enter this national contest at extrasports1300.com for a chance to fulfill your winter wish list, sponsored locally by Downtown Colorado Springs and Downtown CS.com. Text message came in. Consistency is the theme of the day, apparently, given the results last night for the Avs and the Nuggets. From the 719, what do you mean Georgie isn't consistent? If there's one thing you could count on, it's that if he's in goal, the Avs are most certainly going to have to come from behind to win that game. He's a constant letdown. I don't know if that counts. I was kind of hoping for a different kind of consistency. But you're right. That is about the one thing. Because even when he's good, it feels like he gives up an early goal. Like I said, Avs minus 12 in goal differential in the first period. Even when it's good in goal for the Avs, they still are having to rally, giving up an early goal. But what's so maddening about it, again, is that there just isn't a clear answer to that out there. Right? It just, you can get a Scott Wedgewood. With all due respect to Scott Wedgewood, you can find other Scott Wedgewoods. If you believe that the real issue is Justus Onanen, you can fix that. I don't think it's a real problem. It's not the root cause. It's the other guy in goal. And there just don't seem to be a lot of candidates that the Avalanche can realistically bring in to supplant him. And I don't think Scott Wedgewood is that guy either. Call it a symptom, not the root cause. Call it a different issue. Call it what you will. But Scott Wedgewood, the trade itself tells you everything you need to know. It is them saying, yeah, Justus Onanen, we can't wait around for this guy. We need to bring in somebody that we know what we're going to get. But that's not the bigger issue. Now I'm tired of hearing it's the defense. It's not. Stop. Look at it. Look at their decor. I mean, their decor is about as deep as anybody's in the NHL. I'm so tired of, it's the no, it's not. It's not the defense. Okay? It's not. It's goaltending. It is. Just be consistent. If you're, I mean, I don't know. Val Nichushkin don't leave the team before game 6 of a series and give me the Alexander Georgiev of last year, and let's see where that gets the Avs. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I didn't love Georgiev last year. I was highly critical of Alexander Georgiev last year. I would love for that Alexander Georgiev to be back. I pine for that kind of goaltending for this team. That's, if we could just get back to that, and Val Nichushkin sticks around and everything's good with him, then let's see where that gets the Avs. My gut tells me it's not going to get them to win a Stanley Cup, but let's just try it out. Not even getting that at this point. Your reigning USL champions, Colorado Springs Switchbacks, made another roster move today as they are doing some moving and shaking. That's the thing about, and you know this from the Avs and the Nuggets, you win a title and then it's like, oh, well, now you got to go on the business of the offseason. You don't have a lead up. You got to go jump in with everybody else and start making roster decisions despite playing the last game of the season. And we've seen quite a few moves. Juan Tejada is back. Zach Zandy is coming back. Christian Herrera is coming back. Duke Lacroix is coming back. Jonas Fjellberg they brought back and kind of forget because of the the Switchback success that they didn't have Jonas. And he was a key role player for this team. They didn't have him. Now we'll see what happens with Yosuke Hanya and his future. Obviously, he came to the Switchbacks from Rapids too. So is that agreement going to go on, or is he going to be, because then you would figure Juan Tejada or Jonas Fjellberg would get that spot on a regular basis. And then the move today that they made was they brought back Stevie Echeverria. And I think in many ways, Speedy Williams is the unsung hero of this Switchbacks team. He gets very few of the headlines, but he is as integral to this team in the role he plays as anybody. Well, Stevie Echeverria is the next guy up for that role. And we've seen at times Stevie Echeverria come through and play extremely well. Again, trying to keep together the depth of this team, because that's ultimately what helped win this team a title. They lost Jonas Fjellberg and still were able to win a championship. Yosuke Hanya at times struggled. Other guys stepped up. That's what Stephen Hogan has been building towards over these last couple of years, is trying to make the roster at least two deep at every position. And bringing back Stevie Echeverria helps them do that. Now, one spot that you look at and you say probably the Switchbacks are going to need to make a move is at the forward position. They brought back Justin Dillon, but they lose Ronaldo Damas. That loan agreement has passed. It feels to me, and I know my relationship with the organization, this is not insider knowledge. This is just me opining about where I see this roster. I got to imagine let's lock up all of these parts and then go make a move. And losing Damas, it's not insignificant. I know there were other guys, and look, Jairo Enriquez is one of them that is not coming back, and he played a key role. But you look, you have Juan Tejada, you have Jonas Fjellberg, you have some guys that can pick up the slack in that regard. They're going to need somebody. I don't know whether Justin Dillon is the starter or not. They're going to need another body, and these other guys that they're bringing back don't fill that role. So it feels to me that what Stephen Hogan is doing is first locking down the guys, as many of them and at other positions as he can, and then it will be to go out and shop, whether it's a straight up signing or another loan agreement, to bring in somebody to deliver the goals. Ronaldo Damas led the team in goals this year. I know other players stepped up and were the heroes of the playoffs, but Ronaldo Damas, they don't get to where they got without him. But this is the business of soccer, right? It's a loan agreement. Loan agreements expire. Players got to go back. And you got to try and find somebody else. And that looks to be at the top of the shopping lists, so to say, for Stephen Hogan as this offseason continues. But you look at the moves that were made, and a lot of the guys that you watched play a key role in the Switchbacks hoisting that trophy a couple weeks ago are going to be back. And that's what you want, right? Hashtag run it back. Going to lose some guys. It's natural. It's always going to happen. But Switchbacks look like they're bringing back as many guys as they possibly can. So we'll see where they go from here. A reminder, by the way, that coming up on Friday, which is now just a couple of days away, this whole week has been, I don't know if I'm coming or going. I don't know what day it is, minute to minute. Friday is when the Switchbacks are doing their championship celebration. Today, they announced there's going to be a Q&A that you, the fan, can ask some questions of the brain trust, as it were, from ownership down to the sidelines. So that'll be Friday evening, 5:30 to 7:30 at Widener Field. Switchbacks FC for more, switchbacksfc.com, I should say, for more information on that. Coming up next, why this is a great time for the Denver Broncos to be heading into a bye week. Welcome back. Drive Time Sports on this Wednesday. Coming up tonight, our coverage starting at 6 o'clock. Air Force women's basketball back at home taking on Utah Valley. If you have not heard, the Falcons are off to their best start in program history, at least the Division I era, which I think it's okay to just say ever. But I'll have the call from Clune Arena coming up a little bit later on this evening. Some business to take care of in the meantime. Your thoughts on this Wednesday, 719-247-1313. Still some things to discuss as it pertains to the Denver Broncos before they go away for their bye week. And when the schedule comes out and you see that a bye week is as late in the season, actually the latest it could possibly be for the Denver Broncos, you look at that and you say, that's not great. But now that the Broncos are here, it feels like about the best time to have a bye week that you could have possibly seen. If you wanted to insert this bye week at any time prior to now, I still think right now might be the perfect time. Because what the bye week is about rest. Mentally and physically. I think this team needs both. I think that the game on Monday showed the Broncos getting away from what had made them successful. Bo Nix being a little bit more cavalier with the football, making some really bad decisions that could have cost the Denver Broncos the game. The coaching staff, a bit arrogant in their unwillingness to adjust to the issues they were having, specifically covering Jerry Jeudy. I think this is a good time for the Broncos to reset and work on coming out of this bye week as the team that they have been for now a month and a half. I looked at the game against the Browns and I said, that's not the Broncos team that I have been watching the weeks leading up to that. That's not the Bo Nix that I had been watching. And I think the best remedy for that is just a reset. And look, any team that gets a bye week as late as the Broncos are getting welcomes it from a physical perspective. And the Broncos certainly probably need some of that. Now, we haven't had the amount of injuries for the Denver Broncos over the last few weeks that some other teams in the NFL are having. So there's no injury out there that's just glaring and like, oh, they need this guy back. But how many of the guys that have been playing are banged up, are dealing with something? 1 week away from an NFL football game is good for that as well. And I've heard a lot, and I understand it's a natural place that people go. You know, do you lose your rhythm? Broncos are in such a rhythm. They're winning games. Well, first of all, I think that depends on how well you think they played against the Cleveland Browns. If you think they played well, then okay, I can see why you would say something like that. But if you're like me and you think that we should really be talking about a Broncos loss over the last couple of days, I don't know the rhythm that they are in that you worry is going to get thrown out of whack. I think they need the reset. But here's the other part of it too. This is, to me, a rhythm from one week to the next. That's like momentum. Right? And momentum in many ways is merely a construct. Right? Momentum is what you make it. If you take the good things from the previous week and you leave the bad things behind, then yeah, it feels like you're building momentum. But especially in this sport, like one week to the next, one game is not necessarily an indicator of the next. And Monday's a perfect example of it. The Broncos got away from a lot of the things that they were doing well. If momentum existed, if they were in this rhythm, then they should have just swept right through Cleveland. They were the better team, but they didn't. So this idea that they're, they're going to be so thrown off. Look at Kansas City. And it's not just Kansas City, but they're the poster child for this. Because over the last few years, you could argue that no team has built up more momentum from one week to the next. No team has a better rhythm going than the Kansas City Chiefs. Right? 12 wins, 13 wins, 12 wins, 12 wins. What they've been, and even before Patrick Mahomes, even with Alex Smith, this team was winning 11, 12, 13 games, right? So there's no better example of a team where you could say, man, this bye week's going to really throw off the rhythm. They're doing so well. They have so many wins. And yet, what's the conversation about Andy Reid in the bye week? Comes out the next week and he's like 40-2 or something like that. It's not 40-2, but Andy Reid off of a bye week is the most dangerous thing in the NFL. And if any team has a reason to think that a bye week will throw off the rhythm, it's Kansas City. But they rest up mentally, physically, and it gives them extra time to game plan. And with the bye week being as late in the season as it is, think about the amount of work the Broncos can get done. There are 4 more opponents. That's it. How much advanced scouting can you get done during a bye week when you only have 4 future opponents? Certainly more than if you take a bye week, week 8. So it's not just about the Colts game that this bye week benefits the Denver Broncos. It's the last 3 as well. LA, Cincinnati, Kansas City. And oh, by the way, 2 of those teams you know pretty dang well already, given that you've lived in their division. So yes, you're going to do some work on the Chargers and the Chiefs, but really you could focus on primarily on Indianapolis and Cincinnati. They're the ones that you got to learn about. You don't need to learn much about the Chargers and the Chiefs. This bye week could really set up the Denver Broncos to have a strong finish to the season. How many wins that turns out to be remains to be seen. But they can put themselves in a pretty prepped and ready spot for all 4 of these teams down the stretch. I was looking at this today. They've had 5 games this year where just 1 week to the next, forget about if a team played on a Thursday, then a Monday, then a Sunday, just the week going into the game, the Broncos have had either a rest advantage or disadvantage in 5 games. Tell me if you can spot a trend here or a common thread. The 2 games where they've had a rest advantage, Kansas City, Carolina. The 3 games that they've had a rest disadvantage, Jets, Chargers, Browns. It's not wins losses. They're 2-1 with the latter group, 1-1 with the former group. It's not about results. But could you say that even though they won 2 of the 3, Jets, Chargers, Cleveland, that you could put those 3 in a group of not the best that the Denver Broncos have looked this year? They won 2 of them. I would say overall, they didn't look great in all 3. They had rest disadvantages in those games. Meanwhile, the 2 that they've had rest advantages, Kansas City, if you take out the result and take out the last play of the game, you could put that performance against Kansas City up against any as the best we've seen the Denver Broncos. In Carolina, I know that Sean Payton wasn't happy about it, but that there was a lot of good in that game. So it's a smaller sample size for sure, but it did strike me when I went into the rest advantage, disadvantage. I'm like, the 3 games where they had less rest than their opponent, it didn't look that great. The 2 that they did have an advantage went pretty well. To that end, they're not going to have a rest advantage against the Colts. Colts are on a bye week too. Chargers, same thing. Week to week, they're on the same schedule. Cincinnati, and this goes back to the Sean Payton's willingness to flex the game, they're going to have 3 days rest advantage. And then the last game against Kansas City plays on Christmas. Their whole schedule is way different. Kansas City's going to have a rest advantage. But then you go back and look at the bigger picture. Okay, week to week, there's only 1 game that the Broncos are going to have a rest advantage, but they just had their bye week. Chargers took their bye week in week 5. So if you look at the bigger picture, the Broncos have a pretty good rest advantage over the Chargers, given that they will have come off their bye week just a week and a half before that, and the Chargers have been going since week 6. This is the right time. This is the right time. As the season has gone on, it is very clear that this team Monday night looked like a team that needed a break, mentally and physically. And the best teams use the bye week and the rest they get as a weapon. And the Broncos have that opportunity here as they try to lock down a playoff spot and maybe more, given what the stakes might be in that Chargers game here in a few weeks. 719-247-1313. If you still have thoughts on the Broncos-Browns game the other night, yesterday was a short show, so I want to give you that opportunity. Coming up next, I'll chat a little bit more Broncos with Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 here on Extra Sports 1300. a playoff spot. Joining me now to discuss is Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports. Jessica, how are you?
Good. Trying to shake off some of that, vacation. I don't want to say hangover, but, was off for a little bit last week. But what a game to come back to on Monday night.
Yeah, just for those of us who weren't as fortunate as you were to be in the building, I mean, I can't recall watching a game that was that crazy this year. I mean, how was it to be there in person?
No, I think that was maybe one of the best games that I've actually seen at Empower Field in terms of, the crowd being in it the whole time, the back and forth nature of that game. It was just such a fun game to see in person. And like I said, the crowd was insane. Those 2 pick sixes, I don't think I've heard Empower Field be that loud. And I recall saying that one time earlier this season, but this definitely topped that for sure.
And how about the added dynamic with Jerry Jeudy? I mean, was he booed every time? It sounded like every time.
Yeah, but he was eating it up. I mean, you probably saw some of the videos on social media.
Mm-hmm.
He was like really playing into that villain role, and he loved it. And I don't know how much the broadcast caught this, but Corey on the field after the game, got a really good view of him going up to Sean Payton after the game saying like something like, "You see what I got, coach? Like, you see what I can do?" And I think Sean Payton handled it really well too. He was like, "No, I'm proud for you, man. Like, I'm proud for you. Like, this is what we wanted to see." And so, they ended up smiling and laughing it off, but he was eating up the booze for sure.
I'm sure you talked about it. I know you talked about the Jerry Jeudy return, if not revenge game on Monday. Were you expecting that from him?
Absolutely not. We were expecting Pat Surtain to be glued to him on every play, and we expected it to be a tough matchup all week leading up. That's what the Broncos were talking about. Cortland Sutton saying, that's our guy. It's all love, even though he said he was going to try to whip us on Monday night. But he's got a tough matchup with cornerback 1. And so it was very surprising to see how the Broncos handled it. And to say we weren't expecting that would be an understatement, but he came out and definitely showed Broncos country what he can do. And I just think the Broncos handled it extremely poorly.
Yeah. I mean, how many catches in for Jerry Jeudy did you start going, why isn't Surtain on him?
Pretty much immediately I started scratching my head. And, it was just kind of that anticipation of, all right, Vance Joseph is going to switch things up on this next Browns possession. And, just waiting to see the changes. And it was certainly weird to see that it took until, what was it, maybe their the second to last or their last, when Chris Abrams-Strain started to come in and take possession or take control of that matchup. But yeah, it was definitely weird to see. And you didn't see any of those conversations on the sideline really between Sean Payton and Vance Joseph from my vantage point of like, hey, what's going on here? So I don't know if it was just from the press box that we were all talking about it, if they were just really putting their trust in Levi Wallace, but yeah, they left him out to dry there on Monday night.
Jessica Mendoza, my guest. Broncos felt like they would be okay without Jerry Jeudy. Now, without that Jerry Jeudy, if that was the Jerry Jeudy that was here, then okay, we're talking about a different story. But it feels like they've, compensated for the loss of what Jerry Jeudy was in Denver. What did you make of the Josh Reynolds news yesterday?
Yeah, that was really surprising as well. And it makes me wonder what's going on behind the scenes. I know there's some people talking about, like how much it had to do with the shooting he was involved in and, more on that. But I think what it really just tells us is that the Broncos trust their younger guys, and that's the direction they're going in. And so I don't know, he had a great first 5 games with the Broncos. And so I don't know if it's just been a really slow return for him and he doesn't feel ready to get back, or maybe he didn't look ready to get back on the field for the Broncos, but obviously with him getting picked up today, he must be ready to go. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but I really like Josh Reynolds on this team. So I wish him the best. And I hope he's fully good mentally and physically, because that was a scary situation for sure. But yeah, definitely surprising, but it tells me that the Broncos feel comfortable and confident with what they have without him.
Do you think that, and I know I'm jumping ahead and there's still much of the season to play out. Do you think that the Broncos would be content if they started next year with the same group of receivers they have right now?
I do. I think so. I think because, like we've talked so much about how young that receiving core is, and there's, in theory, only so much room to grow and get better. I think they like the trajectory that they're on. I think Troy Franklin has really surprised a lot of us because of the way that he started his season, wasn't getting involved much, dropping passes. He's looked so much better. And Devon Bailey, I think he can be really dangerous for this Broncos team. So it wouldn't hurt to bring somebody else in, that's for sure. But Cortland Sutton is really coming into, what we've wanted him to be for quite some time. And that connection with Bo Nix, you can just see it get better and better each week. So yeah, I think they have a really good, solid ground to stand on. And I love going back to, beginning of the season, Broncos roster was ranked as one of the worst. Who are these guys on this team? And, I know Monday night wasn't a perfect showing for the rest of the football world to see what they're all about and, the kind of football, the brand of football they've been playing the past 5-6 weeks before that. But, they came up in big moments, and that Marvin Mims catch will stick in the back of my head, I think, for weeks to come. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, when the highlight reel of Bo Nix's season is put together, I mean, is that, I don't know where you put the best highlight, if it's at the beginning or at the end, but do you put that, is that going to be the throw from Bo Nix that is on his end of the year highlight reel when the Broncos are celebrating that they found their franchise quarterback?
I think it's definitely got to be near the top. And from what I've heard, people watching on the broadcast, they were saying that the broadcast crew was talking about Bo Nix is, in that game, he was scrambling a little bit too much. They weren't really sure why he was leading the pocket as much as he was. Mm-hmm. And as they were saying that, he's almost, I can't remember if he was in his own end zone or he was close to his own end zone. He steps up into the pocket. He throws what could have been a disastrous pass, and it just lands perfectly on Marvin Mims, and the dude just takes off with his speed. It's definitely got to be up at the top. And that was, that really changed a lot of the momentum of this game. Until, of course, Jerry Jeudy comes back, their first play on the very next drive, he's gone. So that changed things too. But just that highlight alone was a beautiful pass. And I think it was, a good play and a good moment in prime time to show why he has been in the conversation for Rookie of the Year.
Do you think, as of today, taking into account the Browns game, that Bo Nix is the front runner for Rookie of the Year?
I think right now he is. I do. And I do like that Sean Payton took responsibility for that second interception. The first one was super fluky, and, it popped off one of the Browns' shoulder pads. I like that Sean Payton said he got a little bit, overzealous with that play call. And there were plenty more moments to look at for Bo Nix. And directly after the game, he was asked about how great this win was. And the first thing he said was, there are moments in this game that I'm going to look back on and be upset with myself. And thankfully we have the bye to, take a look at how I can be better. So I don't believe that he's, getting too, full of himself or too excited about the potential of that award. I really feel like he's one of those guys that is constantly trying to be better. He's a proven great leader of this team. Everyone's bought in on him, and we've seen that from the very beginning of the season. So if he continues to be what he has been before the Browns game and moving forward for the rest of the season, I definitely think he should be winning that award at the end of the year.
Well, and what it is, and you could use a lot of different adjectives to describe it, but that whole thing with Bo Nix in some of the throws he made, and also Sean Payton calling pass plays in some of those situations, some of those that's what it is confidence. Now, you could use a negative adjective to describe it if you didn't like that, or you could use a more positive adjective than confidence if you love it. But in the end, what it is confidence with Sean Payton towards Bo Nix, but also confidence that Bo Nix has.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that's the one thing I didn't say in that last statement. Is just you can see the confidence radiating from him. And there was a lot of chatter in the press box during that game with like, what are they doing? They're just trying to like match what the Browns are doing with Jerry Jeudy and Jameis Winston. They're throwing the ball way too much. And I do think they got away from themselves a little bit in that game, just, you know, with the back and forth nature of the game and just how exciting it was, prime time, all that stuff. So I think moving forward, they need to, as I know you agree with, they need to get back to their identity and who they've been and run the ball a little bit more. But I do love to see the confidence, not only in Bo Nix, but what Bo Nix has in himself, what he knows he can do. And that Marvin Mims throw is just a perfect example.
Jessica Mendoza, my guest. Good time for the bye week. You think that this is good for the Broncos ultimately to have this bye week now?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think looking at it at the beginning of the season, I was like, gosh, that's such a late bye week. And going back to all of, or at least my expectations for the beginning of the year, if the Broncos weren't having the best season, this would just be kind of a waste of a bye week, right? If they weren't in the run for the playoffs, this would not be so valuable. But I think especially after a game like we just saw on Monday night, you know, if they had a perfect blowout game, you know, against the Browns, it might be a dangerous bye week because they're sitting back, maybe patting themselves on the back too much. But they won the game, so they have a good feeling going into this break, but they also know that there's a lot to improve. And their goals, I think, are higher than to just be the 7th seed in the AFC. So I think that they're going to get right back to work and come out pretty hungry against the Colts on December 15th.
Yeah, and then right on the heels of that short week is the game that you're referring to where the Broncos can do something or do the most in when it comes to moving up in the playoff picture. Let me ask you this on the way out. Lot to be decided, obviously, of the teams that the Broncos could end up playing. Like, they're not going to play the Chargers. I don't even know that they would end up playing the Texans. I think that it doesn't seem like that's going to work out. Of the more realistic teams that they could match up with, and for whatever reason, whether you're confident that they'll win or just because you're a storyteller and you want to tell the best story, which potential first round matchup would you like to see most with the Denver Broncos?
Well, I don't know how possible it is, but how perfect would it be if they played the Steelers? I mean, come on. Finally that is matchup with Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah, I presented it as if there were no wrong answers. There is a right answer, and you selected it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be incredible. And I remember one of our producers, who's a huge Broncos fan, came in early, like weeks ago. And he was like, you know, there's another chance. They're going to play the Steelers, and maybe Russell Wilson will be in. And like, it's coming. It could happen. You know, I think that would be the NFL's perfect scenario. I think Broncos fans would love it. And I just think that's definitely their best matchup as well. I mean, you go back to early in the season, that was not the Broncos that we have now. And it's not the Steelers that we have now either. So I think it would be the most exciting matchup for sure. And maybe even potential for the Broncos to move on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, setting aside the Russell Wilson stuff, you're right. I mean, the Steelers are different in an obvious way. Broncos, they haven't made a lot of personnel changes, but they are vastly different from what they were when they saw the Steelers all the way back in week 2. I mean, you want to talk about, coaches always say, well, the last matchup doesn't mean anything. They can really get away with it on this one. Sean Payne and Mike Tomlin will take nothing from that last game all the way back in week 2. I sat down and did all the different machinations of it. There is a scenario. I don't know where I have it written down. So that I don't know what seed they have to be and what has to happen. Steelers followed by, if they get past that, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think that would be great. I would
Wouldn't it?
You go on, you beat the Steelers, and then you have one of your biggest rivals at the next step.
Right.
That's
And
crazy.
we'll see what happens week 18, but
Mhm.
also the way that the last game ended. That would be the best. But first things first, right? They got to get in the playoffs. They haven't clinched anything yet. Don't be
Right.
so presumptuous, Jessica. You're like moving on, and you're like they're gonna beat the Steelers, and slow down a little bit.
You're egging me on.
That is true. That is what I am known for. Jessica, always appreciate the time, and look forward to the next time you and I get a chat.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
You bet. That's Jessica Mendoza, KKTV 11 Sports, joining me here on Drive Time Sports. Speaking of the next time Jessica and I get a chat, that's tonight. KKTV 11 News at 10. I will be joining Jessica. I will be going to her dojo, coming into my house here, going to her house coming up at 10 to talk more about the Broncos and the Browns. And if you've been listening to the program the last couple of days, Jessica and I vary a little bit in our take on Monday. We agree on a lot, but there's some differences. She's also going to be on the air here in less than an hour for KKTV 11 News at 5:30 to see what else. I'm not on at 5:30, obviously, but 10 o'clock I will be. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and we want to make it even better with $1,000 towards your winter wish list. You can use it for holiday shopping, travel, a Clark Griswold-esque holiday display, or to treat yourself. I mean, if you win, you don't have to tell anybody. You can just take it and get what you want for yourself. Enter this national contest at xtrasports1300.com for a chance to fulfill your winter wish list, sponsored locally by Downtown Colorado Springs and downtowncs.com. Brett says it is the holiday debut of Yukon Cornelius tonight at 10 on Channel 11. I mean, a little bit. My beard's not as long, and I would have to say I'm a little bit more fit than Yukon Cornelius is. I am not as rugged as he is. But yep, it is that time of the year. I don't know what I was supposedly before that, but certainly now it's the holiday season. Yukon Cornelius, this guy. Catching strays here from Chris. You mean the Chiefs should have lost to the Broncos and the Raiders? What is this? With the Chiefs having a rhythm? Is that what elicited this comment? Probably. Although you guys don't need any. You can bring up the Chiefs and their, in your mind, lucky wins. But there is a difference, though, in all seriousness. Like, that's fine, whatever. And I will be sending NFL referees a fruit basket for the holidays to thank them for getting the Kansas City Chiefs to this point. I do it. Patrick Mahomes does it. We're doing that again this year. But there is a difference because the Broncos, and I just talked about this yesterday, the Broncos winning a game against Cleveland is kind of to what their identity has been. Right? They can look great. They can look not great. But going up against these teams that are a little bit more on their level, right? Or below their level. They are the team that's not going to make the mistake that cost them the game. It's going to be the other team, and they'll be ready to take advantage of it. And that's the credit that I can extend the Broncos, is that even though I didn't like a lot of what I saw from Bo Nix, I hated what I saw from the defense, yet there they were. That was a game late. Game wasn't out of reach. Opponent made the mistake. Broncos pounced on it. But that's what their identity has been, which isn't that much different than what Kansas City's is. What's the difference? I think it's how long you've done it. I think it's who you do it against. And it's a respect level. Like, there's a level of respect that is extended towards the Kansas City Chiefs, and for good reason, given what they have been, where these close games, and by the way, I believe the Browns game is the first, one score Broncos win where I've said that the Broncos are lucky to have won. Now, the Raiders games, obviously it changed on Gardner Minshew interceptions. But I didn't say that the Broncos were lucky. The Browns game is really, even though it's kind of more of the same, it's different than some of these other one-score games that the Broncos are winning. But with the Chiefs, they have this, reputation of being so meticulous and being so well prepared that something like the Broncos, and you saw all the videos after, like, that was a problem with the Broncos' protection on field goals all season. And the Chiefs saw that and exploited it. So, but it starts with Chiefs have been doing this for 2 years. Broncos have been doing this for not even a full season yet. But there are some similarities. And I guess I look at it more, Andy Reid and Sean Payton are similar. They both have that same mindset. My team's going to be the best prepared. My team's not going to be the one that makes the big mistake. You are. And my team's going to take advantage of it. That's what Andy Reid goes into each week thinking. That's what Sean Payton was in New Orleans and what he is now in Denver. And now the players are starting to pick up on it. The players are doing their part. But that's always been Sean Payton's game plan. Win the margins. The best teams do that. The Broncos have been able, the reason why the Broncos are going to be a playoff team is that they have been able to win on the margins. Enough to get in. Now, they haven't done it against the Baltimore, the Pittsburgh, the Kansas City, the Buffalo, the teams that they're at some point going to have to run through if they're going to make this more than just a cameo in the playoffs. That's the next step. But against these teams that are either on their same level or below, you've seen that the Broncos are not going to make the big mistake. And that has plagued this team for years, being the team that makes that mistake. And they made plenty of mistakes on Monday. They didn't make the mistake. Jameis Winston did. And the Broncos were the beneficiary of it. I got to head up to the Air Force Academy. If you don't mind clearing a path for me, that would be amazing. I will be back with you at 6 o'clock for Air Force and Utah Valley as the Falcons try to build upon the best start in program history. And then, tomorrow we'll reconvene at 3 and have more conversations regarding sports. Enjoy your evening.